jury will be in just a moment. Mr. Colwell, if you want to come back to the witness stand. And they'll be coming through that door in just a moment. So you can have them come in as soon as they're ready.
Sit down.
Nope, just stand up for now. Yeah. Guess we all heard that. You can go ahead and have a seat then. We'll wait until they're... All right, Attorney Hinckley, when you are ready.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Colwell, before the lunch break, we were talking generally about cell phone communications, and we're going to go into specific communications. Up on the screen is a chart, states Exhibit 24, that the jurors have seen many times before. There's an entry on the chart with your name followed by a telephone number, 603-509-8673. Sitting here today, do you remember whether that was your cell phone number at the beginning of 2017?
I couldn't honestly tell you.
Okay. Could reviewing prior testimony that you gave closer in time perhaps refresh your recollection?
Perhaps.
Counsel 521. So, Mr. Colwell, I'm just going to ask you to read from 1 to 6, lines 1 to 6. So obviously there's a number in there. Does that jog your recollection at all? It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Okay. That being said, you gave sworn testimony in this matter, right?
I did.
And you provided a cell phone number at the time, right?
Yes.
And at the time that you gave the cell phone number, back then it was in your memory, right?
It was.
And you're being honest back then.
Of course.
Counsel, with that, I'm going to offer the number 603-509-8673, which is the number highlighted.
Yes.
Is there any objection? All right. That'll be admitted as substantive testimony.
Sitting here today, do you remember what cell phone numbers the defendant, Dean Smronk, and Christine Sullivan had back in 2017?
I do not.
So next on the screen is a calendar for the week beginning January 23rd, 2017. We're going to review numerous cell phone communications that occurred around and in this time period, which for the record are contained in State's Exhibit 17. You've reviewed the text messages before that we're going to be looking over.
I have.
Is it fair to say that sitting here today, some of the text communications from 7 years ago are more memorable than others? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Have you discussed these very same text messages that we're going to be going over in previous proceedings back in this case, closer to 2017?
I did.
The communications that we're going to be showing on the screen, all of which you reviewed before, do they accurately reflect who was exchanging the messages, the sender and the recipient?
They did. They do.
So with that in mind, let's review the text messages. The slide being shown is a series of 3 text messages from January 21st and 2 from January 22nd. I'm going to read those text messages first, Mr. Colwell, and then I'm going to have some follow-up questions for you. So we're starting with Saturday, January 21st. You to Dean Smoronk, hey bro, you're gonna come down. Then Dean Smoronk to you, yes, I'm pissed. I was up all night on 3 hours sleep and made the mistake of closing my eyes without operating something like a car, a piece of equipment, or a machine gun to keep me up, LOL. I'm getting dressed, I'm sorry, bro. And then a text message, you to Dean Smoronk, ha 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 ha, it's all good, bro. And then there's two from Sunday, January 22nd. The first is a text message from you to Dean Smoronk. Hey bro, thank you so much for coming down and hanging out with me and my brothers. It means a lot to me for you to come down when I know you are so busy, but truly I consider you a brother and proud to call you that. Love and respect, brother. And then Dean Smoronk sends you a text message. I was glad to be there, bro. Quite the clan of good dudes. It was great to get a break from here, and the change of scene was very cool. Unfortunately, I came up the hill, helped Christine, and passed out when I sat down on the couch. Just woke up and think I'll get some more Z's in bed. Talk laters. Those text messages that I just reviewed, those are between you and Dean Smoronk?
They are.
In the first text message, you wrote, bro. What kind of term is bro? Hey, bro, you still coming down?
It's what I call people.
And is that a term that you use just with Dean Smoronk or with other people as well?
With other people as well.
Did you hear Dean Smoronk call people bro as well?
Yes.
So in the first text message, you asked whether Dean Smoronk was going to come down, and then the early morning text on the next day, you thanked him for coming down and hanging out with your brothers. Those portions of the text messages are highlighted in red. Where were you talking about in these text messages?
The clubhouse.
While you were selling drugs, were you a member of a motorcycle club?
I was.
And the clubhouse you're referring to is the motorcycle clubhouse?
It is.
Dean Smoronk, in the last text message on the screen, wrote that he was going to the hill to help Christine, highlighted in yellow, and then I'm pointing out with the clicker. What is the reference to hill?
The house up in Meterborough Road.
And that, again, is a term that you would refer to it as the hill?
It is.
So let's continue with January 22nd and turn to 3 text messages from later that same day. We have a text message from you to Dean Smoronk. Hey bro, just wanted to let you know I got a text from our friend again, and he said he couldn't come yesterday because he was feeling confused again. I'm starting to get real worried about him. Then a text from Dean Smoronk to you. Tough love. He's not said a thing to me. He's not being confused. He's being stupid, and I won't let it slide. And then you, a text to Dean Smoronk. Okay, bro. Who is the our friend being written about, which is highlighted in red, and what is the subject of the text message exchange between you?
All right, compound, you can break the question down into 2.
Sure. Who is the our friend that's being written about that's highlighted in red in your first text message here?
I'm talking about Tim.
And what is the subject of this text message exchange between you and Dean Smoronk about the defendant, Tim Verrill?
About him getting confused and...
Who told you that he was feeling confused again?
Tim did.
And what do you remember about the defendant telling you that he was feeling confused? What do you remember about that? If you do.
I mean, I just remember him telling me, he would tell me that he was getting confused, and that he would also tell me that he just needed to get some sleep.
Who are you starting to get real worried about, as you wrote in the first text message highlighted in yellow? I'm starting to get real worried about him. Who are you referring to?
Tim.
And again, why were you getting real worried about the defendant, Mr. Verrill?
Because he was, it says it in the text, because he's getting confused.
You were using drugs at this time, right?
I was.
You knew other people who were using drugs at this time, right?
I did.
And the defendant was using drugs at this time?
He was.
The defendant is who you were getting real worried about?
He was.
Continuing with text messages between you and Dean Smoronk, now we're going to Monday, January 23rd. Let me read through these text messages, Mr. Colwell, as well as the ones on the next slide, and then I'm going to have some follow-up questions. So we start here, Dean Smoronk to you. Are you able to see me today to talk about my options? Then you to Dean Smoronk. Absolutely, brother. I have some running around to do this morning, but I should be there around noon, 1 p.m. Is that cool? Then Dean Smoronk to you. Yeah, me too. Got to go to town clerk. Then you to Dean Smoronk. You need a ride? Then again, you to Dean Smoronk. I'm in Rochester right now doing some more intel on that matter from Saturday after I can swing up and grab you. And then you to Dean Smoronk. I'm heading your way, bro. Then Dean Smoronk to you. Okay, bro, I've gotten all stressed out and don't have a cool head, but I'm ready. Then think you can still call it dude that he rides with? And then you to Dean Smoronk, yup, followed by you to Dean Smoronk. No answer, bro, only have Facebook Messenger. Sorry if I hear back and confirm the insect problem is now affecting the house. I will let you know. They usually will set up a web for the night if it is. And then we finish up, Dean Smoronk to you, cool, cool. Mr. Colwell, do you remember what Dean Smoronk was discussing with respect to his options from the previous slide that we saw? And what he's writing about in these slides?
Talking about an individual that had beat up Christine, and options on how we could, like, what we were going to do about it.
The individual, is that relating to the insect problem and setting up a web?
Overruled. Go ahead.
It is.
Who was that person?
His nickname was Spider, so that's why I used that. His Mike Detroit.
But people knew him as Spider?
Spider Mike.
And that's what the reference to insect problem and web is?
It is.
Let's continue with January 23rd. The last text message ended at 7:03. This next exchange begins about 4 hours later, that same evening of the 23rd. Again, let me read them, and then I'm going to have some follow-up questions. And here we're starting, you to Dean Smoronk. Hey, bro, so I was told from my friend that they don't think he was at the spot, I thought. Sorry it wasn't better news. Also got a call from my brother, and he was pretty upset with the waiting and lack of communication. He said and then it follows another text message, you to Dean, wouldn't like to deal with him anymore. And then Dean Smoronk to you, have you talked to Tim? And then you follow up, I have not yet. In the first text message, you refer to speaking with a friend as well as getting a call from your brother. With respect to your brother, is that an actual blood relative, or are you referring to somebody else?
Talking about somebody else.
Who was the subject of these several text messages between you and Dean Smoronk? The person who was not at the spot and who your brother did not want to deal with anymore?
The first one, that they don't think he was at the spot, talking about Spider. And then in the second one, it's you don't have it highlighted, but that's continuing on talking. It says, also got a call from my brother. I'm talking about my brother, quote unquote, right? That wouldn't like to deal with Tim anymore.
So what I'm pointing out with the clicker,
Okay.
This is a conversation, a separate conversation. The first one is about Spider. The
Yep.
second, starting here, continuing to here, is about Tim.
So got a call from my brother, wasn't talking about Tim, it was talking about somebody else, but wouldn't like to deal with him anymore, that's talking about Tim.
And what was that about?
About buying drugs off of him anymore.
And why wasn't the person wanting to deal with the defendant anymore?
Because he was not showing up on time, not taking his calls.
And when you say he wasn't showing up on time, not taking his calls, you're talking about Mr. Verrill, the defendant?
I am.
Continuing with the next two text messages from later that same night, let me read them first. First is a lengthy text message, you to Dean Smoronk. I can, that's no problem. I feel bad, really, but I also know that he told him a time, and he counted on that time because in turn, he told others that same thing, and he ran out of time. Don't mean to add stress onto you, brother. I will just explain to Tim and hope he understands. It's starting to freezing rain right now. Be careful if you plan on going out tonight at all. I will update you after I've spoken to him. Love and respect, my brother. And then a text message, Dean Spronk, to you. Okay, well, I didn't answer my comment a little while ago, and I'm starting to get things finished that were critical items. Then I'm going to pack and crash for a little while, but I'll be back in touch. Love and respect. Do these texts appear to be a continuation of the text conversation that you had with Dean Spronk earlier that day about the defendant, Mr. Verrill?
It does.
And what do you mean when you wrote, I will just explain to Tim and hope he understands, highlighted in red? What was that a reference to?
I believe it was like picking up the money and doing the transaction for him.
So you were actually going to take his place because of the issues that he was having, communicating with people and meeting with people?
Yes.
The text messages that we've been discussing up to this point are between you and Dean Spronk. Was the defendant another person with whom you had regular contact by cell phone, including text messages?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. So the text messages that we've reviewed up to this point, it's between you and Dean Spronk, right?
Correct.
Was the defendant somebody who you also had regular text message communication with?
Yes.
So let me read this text message sent to the defendant on the evening of January 23rd, and then I'm going to have some follow-up questions for you. It's you to the defendant.
Up on his toes.
The next several text messages occur the next day, January 24th. Let me read the first four on this slide. So we have a text message from Dean Spronk to you. In case you're up, I'm finally crashing for about 6 hours. And then the defendant to you, hey bro. And then you to the defendant, hey bro, sorry, and a huge argument with Cassie right now. Can I get at you in a few? And then the defendant to you, yeah. With respect to the text message sent to you at 1:05, hey bro, which is highlighted in red, is bro or brother a term that the defendant often used with you?
Yeah.
And would you use that term with him?
Yes.
In your response, you reference an argument you had with Cassie, highlighted in yellow. Again, who is Cassie, or who was Cassie at this point in time in your life?
At that point in time, she was my girlfriend.
Let's go on to the last text message from this slide, Dean Spronk to you. I'll read it first. Well, I got up on time, but I was haggard as hell, so I took a piss and laid back down, and CV said, fuck it. When I woke up, I was supposed to be leaving. Tim showed up, though, had breakfast with us about an hour ago, then he left. I mentioned the stuff with Rob, and he said he needs to get his schedule in order or something like that. Just keeping you in the loop. Love, respect. The Tim referenced by Dean Spronk, who is that?
Tim Verrill.
And what about the stuff with Rob and the defendant's schedule needing to be kept in order? Is that a continuation of the text messages from earlier and the defendant's issue and not meeting with buyers, basically?
Correct.
Continuing with text messages from the afternoon of January 24th, We have you to Mr. Verrill, the defendant, hey, sorry, hey, bro, sorry. And then the defendant to you, it's okay, I'm in Dover now. And then you to the defendant, shitty, were you able to get a hold of my brother yet today? Then the defendant to you, hasn't gotten back to me.
Just talking about, like, how it will be handled, I don't remember, to be honest.
Fair enough. Let's continue with January 24th. Text messages between you and Dean Smoronk. I'll again read them first. You to Dean Smoronk. Okay, bro, so you're gonna fly out later tonight or tomorrow. I can make up the hill in a little bit. I have some running around to do first. There really is not enough hours in a day. Ha ha ha. Thanks for keeping me in the loop, bro. It's appreciated. LR. Then Dean Smoronk to you. Catching the 6 a.m. flight now. Then you to Dean Smoronk, the last two. Right on. I will swing up then after my errands, bro. Hey, bro, haven't forgot about you. Just trying to handle a bunch of shit right now. So what is the exchange with you and Dean Smoronk regarding flying out and catching the 6 a.m. flight, which is highlighted in red in these text messages?
He was flying down to Florida.
Do you know why he was flying down to Florida?
I don't remember the specifics.
Do you recall if he was flying to Florida alone or if he was with anyone?
Objection, he already answered the question, he doesn't know.
All right, overruled. Go ahead.
Do you know if he was flying to Florida alone or with anyone?
He was flying alone.
What is the reference in the first text message to the hill, which is highlighted in yellow? Is that, again, your terminology for the Meterboro Road residents?
It is.
You end the first text message LR. What is that?
Love and respect.
In the third text message, you wrote, I will swing up then, highlighted in green. You'd swing up where?
To the Meterboro house.
The next two slides are more text messages between your cell phone and the defendant on January 24th. I'm going to read the text messages on this slide and the next, and then I'll have follow-up questions. So we start, the defendant to you, hey bro, and you respond, hey bro. Then the defendant to you, how's it going? And the last two are from you to him. Honestly, pretty shitty right now, but hey, we can't have all good days. You in the area. Then the defendant to you, I could use a chat. Then the next two are you to the defendant. Yeah, come on by, bro. I'm cleaning out my basement right now and then gonna have dinner. Just sitting down for dinner, so should be free when you get here, bro. And then the defendant to you, OMW, on my way,
Correct.
and then you to the defendant, okay.
I was at home.
And that home being 54 Central Street in Farmington that you referred to?
Correct.
Had the defendant been to your house before?
He had?
More than once?
Yes.
And for what reasons would the defendant visit your home?
To hang out. To sell drugs.
In the second message on the screen, the defendant wrote to you that he could use a chat. Did the defendant that Tuesday evening meet at your house?
He did?
And do you remember what the defendant talked to you about at your house that evening?
That was the conversation that I talked about earlier about him thinking I set up a camera in his house.
So that's when he accused you of spying on him?
Correct.
And again, from his language, from his demeanor, from how he was talking, did he sound serious when he was accusing you of spying on him?
He did sound serious.
We're going to complete text messages on January 24th with a late-night exchange between you and Dean Smoronk. And for reference, on the left are the text messages between the two of you from earlier that day, in which you, in substance, relayed that you'd meet up with Dean Smoronk up at the Hill, right?
Correct.
So let me read the remainder of the text messages on the right. Dean Smoronk to you, no worries, I'm rested and up until I travel at 3 a.m. Then there are two exchanges between Dean Smoronk and the defendant, and a call between the defendant and Dean Smoronk's cell phone. And then the last two text messages between you and Dean Smoronk, you to Dean Smoronk. Heading your way, bro, in 5. Hey, bro, knock, no answer. You might have passed out. Have a safe flight, brother. Love and respect. Again, what's Dean Smoronk's reference to travel at 3 a.m., which is highlighted in red?
Flying down to Florida.
And what is the reference in your two text messages at the bottom at 10:45 p.m. and 11:16 p.m., the last two that we see on this screen? Heading your way in 5, knock, no answer.
Heading to the house on Meadowborough Road.
So you went there, you knocked, nobody answered, and you left?
Yes.
Did you have keys to the house in Meadowborough Road?
I did not.
Next on the screen is State's Exhibit 32G. Do you recognize this area of the house?
I do.
Where is this area of the house generally, and where does the green door that's circled in red, where does this door lead to?
So that's in the back of the house, and it leads into the basement.
Back in the beginning of 2017, did that door have a lock?
It did.
And what kind of lock did it have?
It was like I think a punch lock, like a code or something.
Could you access the house using that lock?
I could not,
Why not?
because I didn't have the code.
What about the defendant? Could he access the house using the lock?
He could.
The next series of text messages between you and Dean Smoronk occurs early the following morning. So now we're early in the morning on January 25th. Let me first read them, and then I will have some follow-up questions. So Dean Smoronk to you, no fucking way. Oh man, I was in the shower. Did you come down back? Chris was here. Then you to Dean Smoronk. Yeah, I was knocking on the back door. I could head back up if you want. Would like to talk before you leave anyways. Then Dean Smoronk to you, bro, I would really appreciate that. I'm trying to deal with a few loose ends here. And then you to Dean Smoronk, okay, cool, heading up, bro. Dean Smoronk wrote that he was with Chris, highlighted in red in that first text message. Who did you understand that to mean?
Christine.
You indicated in substance to Dean Smoronk that you wanted to speak to him and that you'd return to the house. Did you go back to Meadowborough Road that early Wednesday morning before he flew off to Florida?
I did.
And you talked about how you went up there initially, you knocked on the door, nobody answered, you left. What about this time? You go back up to the house, does anybody answer this time?
Yeah.
And who was at the house?
It was Dean and Christine.
Do you remember what you wanted to talk to Dean Smoronk about before he left for Florida?
I don't remember. I don't recall.
Fair enough. That Wednesday morning, did Dean Smoronk leave for his planned trip to Florida?
He did.
And how did he get to the airport from the house in Farmington?
How did he get to where?
Yep. How did he get from the house in Farmington to the airport
Christine.
to fly off? Did you stay at the house when they left, or did you leave as well?
I left.
Was anyone in the house when the three of you, Dean Smoronk, yourself, and Christine Sullivan left the house early that Wednesday morning, January 25th.
Not to my knowledge.
So returning to still video, photos of video footage, who again are the two people who we see on these still photos?
Myself and Dean.
And the date indicated in these videos, January 25th, about 3:50 a.m.
Correct.
And returning to State's Exhibit 34, who again is the person circled in blue in these surveillance photos?
Dean.
Over the following days, after Dean Smoronk left early that Wednesday morning for Florida, did you continue to have text message exchanges and phone calls with him while he was in Florida?
Yes.
In those following days, did you ever see Dean Smoronk in New Hampshire?
No.
When did you next see Dean Smoronk after you saw him leave for the airport that early Wednesday morning to fly to Florida?
When I picked him up at the airport.
And that was several days later, an event that we're going to talk about later?
Correct.
So let's return to cell phone communications. And this next slide has text message exchange between you and the defendant later on January 25th. And the next several slides will continue this same day. Let me read the ones on this slide. They begin at 12:58 p.m. You to the defendant, "Hey bro, how you feeling today?" And then the defendant to you, "Better." Then you to the defendant, "I think you should still get checked out, bro. I'm really worried about you." And then the defendant to you, "I was tired last night. I've been trying to turn things around in my life. I was certain I forgot to do something yesterday, but I didn't get some good sleep last night. Now I'm chilling with my father." And then you to the defendant, "Okay, bro." Focusing really worried about him, the text highlighted in red. Is that more of the same that we've been talking about?
Yes.
And again, you believe that the defendant should get checked out by who?
A doctor.
What kind of a doctor?
Like a psychiatrist or something to check out his head.
I'm going to continue with text messages that same afternoon of January 25th. These are continuing text messages between you and the defendant. First is the defendant to you, "What are you up to?" And then you to the defendant, "Waiting for Paul to help me fix the door downstairs. The window broke out of it, so I think going to head to Newington to get a new one." Then the defendant to you, "I got to run to the ranch soon." And then you to the defendant, "Right on." What were you writing the defendant about in that second text message with respect to Paul and going to Newington?
I was, my basement door, exterior basement door, the window broke, and that's my cousin Paul.
We're going to be seeing later on in text messages, there's drug code, right?
Correct.
Now, this is not drug code, this is just your real life, right?
Yes.
The defendant wrote to you that he wanted to run to the ranch soon, highlighted in red. What did you understand that term ranch to be a reference to?
Meterborough Road.
What was the defendant going to the house to do based on conversations that he had with you? If you remember.
I don't remember. Pick up drugs, I'm assuming.
Well, we can't assume, but let me re-ask it, and I'll ask this. Would the defendant typically go to the house to pick up drugs for sale?
Yes.
Continuing text messages between you and the defendant on January 25th. Again, let me read them. First, the defendant to you is Chris up there, and then you to the defendant in the next two text messages. "She should be. I know that she brought him to the airport this morning." And then the defendant to you, "I figured." And the last two are different conversants, so I will not ask you about them. The first text message, who did you understand the defendant's reference to Chris and up there to be? Is Chris up there?
Oh, Christine, sorry, I was looking at the highlighted, I got confused.
I'll get to the highlighted in a second, but the first one is Chris up there. So
Yeah, talking about Christine.
And Meterborough Road?
Meterborough Road, yes.
What about that statement that's highlighted in red? She brought him to the airport. Is that a reference to the trip to the Boston airport to Florida?
It is.
The next series of text messages from January 25th, later in the afternoon, we're going back to you and Dean Smoronk. Let me read them and follow up with some questions. And actually, before I read these, Mr. Colwell, we've seen a lot of text messages between you and Dean Smoronk and you and the defendant. We haven't seen any between you and Christine Sullivan. Was that kind of the nature of your relationship at the time?
Yes.
So we have you to Dean Smoronk. Hey bro, just had my meeting about those plowing accounts, was wondering when we would be able to start hiring on that. He was looking for 16 untrained temps that we bill net 30, we would pay them $1,500 a week. And then there's an auto reply from Dean Smoronk's cell phone followed by a text message from him. Perfect, I'll work on that today and have an answer for you in a matter of hours. Then you to Dean Smoronk, awesome bro, hope the weather is nice, L&R. Then Dean Smoronk's last two text messages to you. A hustle here and a hustle there, life on the wild side, L&R. So explain this text message that you sent to him about plowing accounts and untrained temps.
I was talking about cocaine and 16 untrained, so 16 ounces of uncut cocaine.
So this text message was a coded text message between you and Dean Smoronk about drug sales?
Yes.
That same afternoon of the 25th, right after the exchange that we just reviewed, there's this exchange between you and Dean Smoronk. We have Dean Smoronk to you. Did Tim go to the doctor? And then you to Dean Smoronk. No, I told him I wanted to bring him, and he said he had a good night's sleep, so he didn't want to go, but that was through text because he never came by this morning. Oops, sorry. Dean Smoronk's question to you, did Tim go to the doctor? Is that a continuation of text messages that we've seen up to this point about some concerns about the defendant, Mr. Verrill?
It is.
From what you remember, was Dean Smoronk also trying to get the defendant to consult with a doctor about his mental issues?
Yes.
With respect to your response to Dean Smoronk asking whether or not the defendant went to a doctor, no, I told him I wanted to bring him, and he said he had a good night's sleep, so he didn't want to go. Was the defendant supposed to meet with you that morning, if you remember? If you remember.
I don't remember. Yeah, I can't assume, right? Yeah, I don't remember.
Fair enough. Let's continue with text messages from Wednesday, January 25th. We have more between you and Dean Smoronk. First is you to Dean Smoronk. Hey bro, sorry to bother you. I was just wondering what I should tell the accounts on staffing. They are chomping at the bit to fill these accounts. Heard we might be getting another storm soon. I guess they are way understaffed. The contractor they had before warrants union wages, so they are at a standstill until I let them know when we would have guys available. I know you have a lot going on, and I'm sorry to be a pain, brother. And then Dean Smoronk to you. First is an auto reply, and then he responds Tuesday. You to Dean Smoronk, awesome, thanks, bro. And then him to you, NP. No problem, I take it?
No problem, yes.
Your lengthy text message at the top, is this more code about a drug transaction?
It is.
Who was involved in the drug deal that you were discussing with Dean Smoronk and code in this text message and in the text message that we saw before?
This guy named Kurt.
Excuse me?
This guy named Kurt.
Do you recall if the defendant and Ms. Sullivan was also involved in this deal? If you remember.
I don't remember. I don't think so.
You talked about during this period, before lunch, you talked about the relationship between Dean Smoronk and Christine Sullivan. What about the relationship between Christine Sullivan and the defendant, Mr. Verrill? Was there friction in that relationship too that you remember?
Between Christine and Tim?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what was that frustration or situation, relationship?
Just money being owed, I believe.
And who owed who money from what you understood?
Tim owed Christine money.
Let's turn to the last of the text messages from January 25th. And those text messages are that evening between you and Dean Smoronk. They begin at 9:28 p.m., Dean Smoronk to you. I take it there was a good impression made, and then you to Dean Smoronk, Verri, my brother, Verri, and then Dean Smoronk to you. I'm committing each and every resource to this, and it's going to be one hell of a trick, brother. And then you to Dean Smoronk, I think it's going to be a hell of a year, bro. Do you remember what you and Dean Smoronk were discussing in these text messages?
The cocaine deal.
And that's the deal that was referred to in coded messages that you sent to him at least twice before?
Yes.
So now let's turn to the next day, and we're on Thursday, January 26th. We're going to be going over 10 separate slides of text messages for this day. And they start with 4 slides showing a series of text messages between you and the defendant beginning that morning of the 26th and continuing into that afternoon. So I'm going to first read them all, and then I'm going to have some follow-up questions for you, okay?
Okay.
So they start with you at 10:23 a.m., you to the defendant. Hey, bro, what your email? And then, do you have a Google Calendar? The next 2, the defendant to you. Yo, Jimbo 451 at Gmail. Then the next 2, you to the defendant. Thanks, bro. I'm going to set up that Google Calendar and let me know if you receive anything on it. Name of calendar is Hill Ranch Installations. You to the defendant, let me know if you can see it, bro. The next 2, the defendant to you. Not yet. Where can I add it? And then the last 2 are you to the defendant. Google Calendar app. The first 3 on this page, the defendant to you. Got it last time. I checked. It wasn't there. Got it. I had the calendar on my phone. Needed to app from store. Then you to the defendant. Cool, so I figure what we would do is you add something, all your invoice numbers will start with 01, mine 02. The defendant to you, cool. Then you, in description, we put what needs to be installed. If it is going to be billed net 30 or if paid for at end of job, then when invoice is paid, we put another event up with invoice, paid in full or partial. And if partial description, how much was paid. I picked the color blue, and you can change your color to something also. Just all installs will be clicked on as an all-day event, and we will just add what needs to be done. Do you think will work? Is it too confusing? Him to you, not at all. I like it a lot. Last 2, you to Mr. Verrill, the defendant. Question. Also, are you going to the Hill today? I need to get up there at some point. I'm going to be leaving soon for a haircut, though no probs. Need to go around 8-ish. Would I call up there or would I need you? Okay, awesome. I will delete this one, get a hold of Florida, and see what his email is, and also get Christine so I can put it all together. So what is the subject of this lengthy text message exchange between you and the defendant on the morning and afternoon regarding Google Calendar and what you wrote to the defendant?
So I was trying to develop a system where when we did drug transactions, everybody would be able to see, Dean and Christine mainly, would be able to see what was going out, how much money was getting paid, and then if money was being owed.
So the references to Google Calendar and whatnot, they're all drug-related, drug sale-related.
They are.
In your last text message in this exchange with the defendant, you made references to getting email addresses from Florida and Christine, highlighted in red at the bottom. Who were you referring to, Florida and Christine?
Florida would be Dean, and then Christine's Christine.
In the preceding text message, you asked the defendant whether he was going to the Hill, and you relayed that you needed to get up there, which is highlighted in yellow. The Hill, again, that's a reference to the Meterboro Road residence.
Correct.
And do you remember why you were planning to go to the Meterboro Road house this particular day?
To get drugs.
In that same text message you wrote, would I call up there or would I need you, which is highlighted in green. Why would you need the defendant?
To be able to get the drugs.
And what about to get into the house?
Yes.
That same text message about going up to the Hill is on the left for a reference. Continuing with text messages between the defendant and you on January 16th, I'll first read them. The defendant to you, I don't know what Dean want to do, but Chris is up there and she knows more than me right now. Then you to the defendant, right on, bro. The defendant to you, I'll meet you there if you'd like. And then you to the defendant, cool, that would be awesome. With respect to the first message, the defendant's statement, Chris is up there, who and where did you take the defendant to mean?
Christine up at Meterboro Road.
What about the defendant's statement that Ms. Sullivan knew more than he did? Do you remember what the defendant was talking about?
Just about the business.
And that business being selling drugs?
Correct.
The last text message here has a timestamp of 3:22 p.m., and that's when the next series of text messages start. You to the defendant, around 8 tonight work for you. The defendant to you, yes. You to the defendant, cool, I will text you when I'm ready, bro, thanks. The defendant to you, no problem. And then you to the defendant, do me a favor, bro, and set up an event and see if I can see it. Starting with the last first, do me a favor, set up an event and see if I can see it. Does that refer back to the Google Calendar, drug calendar that you were preparing?
It is.
The first text message, you to the defendant, around 8 o'clock that evening working for him. What's that a reference to?
Going up there?
That's to Meterboro Road?
Correct.
Moving to additional cell phone record entries from Thursday, January 26. First, we have a call, Dean Smoronk to you. And then 3 down, we have a call, you to the defendant. And then a text message, you to the defendant. Just to confirm, I was saying, could you pick me up, bring me with you? They need it before 5. And as much as you can bring to donate, that would help me out a lot. And then the defendant to you, yup, NP, no problem. Do you remember receiving a call from Dean Smoronk on the afternoon of January 26th?
I do.
And what was that call about?
Getting money to Christine
For what?
for drugs that we've bought.
Your call to the defendant at about 4 p.m. You reference it in the text message that you just sent a few minutes later?
I do.
Just to confirm, I was saying, could you pick me up, bring me with you? Is that a reference to the call that you had just made to him?
It is.
What was the topic of that text message and that brief call between you and the
To
defendant?
pick me up and bring me with him to go see Christine to pay up, to give her money.
And again, the money was for what?
Drugs.
And both you and the defendant were going to supply money for this?
Correct.
Turning to additional cell phone communications from January 26th, there's a series between you and Dean Smoronk. You to Dean Smoronk, hey, just a heads up, talked with Tim, he should be at my place in the next 10 minutes, then we are running up to the Hill. And then Dean Smoronk to you, there's an auto reply, and then a call that lasts about 72 seconds. And then the last one is a call with other conversants. Turning to your text message, Tim should be at my place. Again, that's a reference to the defendant, Mr. Verrill.
Yes.
And we're running up to the Hill. That's again a reference to Meterboro Road.
Correct.
Do you remember why you sent that text message to Dean Smoronk?
Because we're, to tell him that we're going to meet Christine.
And did the defendant pick you up soon after this exchange, this text message exchange?
He did.
The call from Dean Smoronk after you sent him that text message about you and the defendant going up to the Meterborough Road address, do you remember what Dean Smorank's call to you was about?
To tell me to get a hold of Christine.
And that call was followed by a call from your cell phone to Ms. Sullivan's cell phone. Did you make that call?
I did,
And do you remember why generally you were trying to get a hold of
to
Ms.
see
Sullivan?
where she was.
Do you remember if you actually spoke to her?
I don't remember.
At some point in time, did you and the defendant arrange to meet Ms. Sullivan somewhere?
Yes.
And where did you arrange to meet with her?
We ended up meeting at the Holy Rosary Credit Union in Farmington.
And in terms of how you were able to do that, seems like you don't have a recollection. It could have been your call with Ms. Sullivan. It
Yeah,
could have been the call with Mr. Smoronk.
Yeah, she must have told me that she was at,
And what was the purpose of the meeting between you and the defendant and Ms. Sullivan?
to give her money for drugs.
And did you and the defendant drive to the bank together?
We did.
And what do you remember happening at the bank?
At one point, I saw her car parked, and I thought she was in the passenger seat, so I
Well, let me
jumped
stop you
out.
there.
Yep.
Why'd you think she was in the passenger seat? Did you?
Because I saw somebody sitting in the passenger seat.
And was this person's back to you? You parked behind them?
I don't remember where we were parked.
Fair enough. Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Continue, please.
And so I got out, and I opened the driver's side door, and I remember, I think I was trying to get in, but I recognized that it wasn't Christine sitting there.
Did you recognize who it was sitting there?
I did not.
Did you later come to find out who that was?
I did.
And who was it?
That was Jenna.
Did you ever remember meeting Ms. Pellegrini before that chance encounter?
No.
Do you remember either Ms. Sullivan or Dean Smoronk ever mentioning Ms. Pellegrini before you bumped into her outside the bank?
No.
So let's turn to additional text messages from January 26th. You to Ms. Sullivan's cell phone, want me to wait outside, and then her cell phone to you, I have her phone, LOL, and then your cell phone to Dean Smoronk, all set, brother. Your text message to Ms. Sullivan, want me to wait outside. Explain that for us, please.
Because she was in the bank, so I was wondering if she wanted us to wait for her to get out of the bank.
What about the reply from Ms. Sullivan's cell phone? I have her phone, LOL.
That was Jenna.
So Ms. Pellegrini actually had Ms. Sullivan's cell phone at the time?
She did.
Shortly after sending and receiving those text messages, did you see Ms. Sullivan outside the bank?
I did.
And what do you remember happening outside the bank?
I remember coming up to her and hugging her and putting money into her purse as I was hugging her.
What about the defendant?
He did, I believe he did the same thing.
Do you remember if you and the defendant talked about another person being with Ms. Sullivan at the bank?
At that time, is that what you're asking?
Yes, at that time.
I don't remember.
From conversations with the defendant, either that time or later on, did he know or appear to know the woman who was with Ms. Sullivan?
I don't remember.
Did you ever see Christine Sullivan again after seeing her outside the bank that late Thursday afternoon, January 26th?
I did not.
Did you receive any phone calls or text messages from Ms. Sullivan on her cell phone after last seeing her outside the bank that Thursday afternoon?
I did not.
Did you receive any communication from Ms. Sullivan of any kind, email, Facebook, anything, after you last saw her that Thursday afternoon?
I did not.
Do you remember where you and the defendant went after meeting up with Ms. Sullivan outside the bank to have this exchange of money for a drug purchase?
To my house.
Let's now turn to text messages from the evening of January 26th. They begin at 8:14 p.m. The first messages that the defendant sends to you at 8:14 p.m. Where was he and what is he texting about? Latching the door, hopping out a couple of times.
He was at my house and talking about the door in my kitchen. And he's talking about the dog that Cassie and I were dog sitting, who was a pain in the butt and kept running out.
So this is not drug code, this is again real life.
Correct.
Were you at the house at the time or you were elsewhere?
I was in the house. I was just in the basement.
The text message that the defendant sent to you at 10:38 p.m. on January 26th. I'm heading up the hill, highlighted in red. Where was the defendant going at that time based on this message?
Going to Meterborough Road.
Your response, I'm in Dover with Ian. Who was Ian and what were you doing with him in Dover?
Ian was a good friend of mine and we were drinking.
And with respect to timing, the first two at around 8:14 and the one where you're saying you're in Dover is closer to 11. So at some point in time, you left the house?
I did.
So this slide and subsequent slides go into the next day, which is Friday, January 27th. The ones on the screen are all time-stamped at 12:17 a.m. We first have the defendant to you, you up, and then the next three are you to the defendant, yes, at the Irving, heading home. What is your text message to the defendant at the Irving a reference to?
The Irving in Farmington?
A gas station?
Yes.
The last text message on the screen, you to the defendant at 12:17, heading home. Where were you heading home from?
Dover.
And your reference to home, again, is that your place that you had with Cassie in Farmington?
It is.
The next text message exchange happens about a minute later, so 12:18 a.m. You to the defendant, you leaving the hill, and then the next two, the defendant to you, yup, I'll stop by, and then you to the defendant, cool. The defendant's text message to you, I'll stop by, highlighted in red. What did you take that to mean? The
He
defendant
was
would
going to come
stop.
by my house.
From the preceding two text message, you leaving the hill, yup, where was the defendant coming from to come to your house?
Meterborough Road. May I please get some more water?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next series of text messages between the defendant and you occur about 15 minutes later. I'll read them and have follow-up questions. So we're starting at 12:33 a.m. You to the defendant, I'm home now. The defendant to you, leaving in 5. And the last two are you to the defendant. Can you pick me up something while there? I left there. What were you referring to when you asked the defendant to pick you up something while there? Pick up what and from where?
Drugs from me to Borough Road.
Continuing with text messages between you and the defendant that early morning of January 27th. And it's going to be the first 3 text messages on this screen. The defendant to you, yup. Then the next 2 are you to the defendant. I know I will be up for 4 hours anyways, but will probably need to straighten up a butt, and then bit. What were you referring to in your text message to the defendant about staying up 4 hours to straighten up?
I was asking for 4 ounces of methamphetamine.
You were asking for drugs to use?
I was.
After your last text message to the defendant, which is about 12:36 a.m. on Friday, January 27th, do you see the defendant at your house at 54 Central Street?
I do.
Do you remember about what time that was when the defendant was at your house on January 27th after that exchange of text messages that went past midnight?
I don't.
Is that a detail that reviewing your past testimony in this matter perhaps may refresh your recollection?
Yes, perhaps.
So I'll ask you to start at the top and to about line 18, but read as much as you want. If you want additional pages, let me know. And when you're done reading, look up.
Okay.
Reviewing that, does that refresh your recollection or does not?
It does.
About what time does the defendant arrive at your house that early morning of Friday the 27th?
1 o'clock. Around 1 o'clock.
About 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Yes.
When the defendant came to your house at about 1 o'clock, was he alone?
He was.
And by what means did he arrive at your house?
He drove.
And that's the dark SUV that we saw photos of before the lunch break?
Correct.
What do you remember happening at your house when the defendant arrived?
He was acting weird.
What do you remember about that?
He asked me if I knew who Jenna was. I remember, him asking me if I knew who Jenna was. I remember telling him I don't. He asked if I thought she was an informant. And I think I said, I don't know. And then, he was pretty worked up about it, so I suggested to him call Dean. So we called Dean.
The defendant comes to your house, asks about Jenna. Does he use the name Jenna?
He does.
When the defendant asked you if you thought Jenna might be an informant, what did you take the defendant to mean by informant?
Like if she worked for the cops.
And you described the defendant as worked up as he was talking about Jenna and the possibility that she might be an informant?
Yeah.
Objection. That's not what he testified to.
Overruled.
I don't believe he used those words.
Overruled.
Are those the words that you used? He appeared worked up?
He did. I did. Yeah.
And when you say worked up, what do you mean by that? What do you recall about the defendant's behavior, demeanor, mannerisms?
He just seemed off. I can't really, like, I don't know. Like, he just seemed off.
Had you ever seen the defendant acting like that before, when you saw him that early Friday morning asking you about Jenna and whether you thought she was an informant?
I mean, I can't recall exactly if I've seen him like that. I've seen him acting off before, but I don't know if, like, that particular, like, how he's acting.
And you remember giving sworn testimony in this case, right?
I do.
Counsel, page 568, beginning line 9. Question, so
Yeah.
the defendant comes to your house, expresses concern to you that a woman named Jenna is at the house and might be a police informant. You tell him, in substance, call Dean. Does the defendant call Dean from what you see?
He does.
And what do you remember hearing the defendant say during that call?
I remember him talking about Jenna and him mentioning not the Jenna down in Florida.
'71, starting with line 24, but certainly if you want to look at anything beforehand, you can. But I'll direct your attention to there. And I'm going to give you another page as well, so you start reading this, and I'll get you another page while you move. And I'll ask you to continue 573 to line 4.
Yep.
Reading that, does that jog your memory as to anything else you recall the defendant talking to Dean about during that early morning phone call?
Yes.
And what else do you remember?
He asked if he thought he should do something about it.
When you say he asked if he thought he should do something about it, who is the he you're talking about?
Tim asked Dean if he should do if Tim should do something about it.
Thank you. Looking at this chart, phone records indicate a call between the defendant's cell phone and Dean Schrunk's cell phone, 1:34 a.m. on Friday, January 27th. It lasts only about 7 seconds, which is indicated by the red arrow. Up to this point, Mr. Colwell, we've gone through various communications between you, the defendant, Dean Schrank, coupled with Christine Sullivan, using what I call regular telephone calls and text messages. But did the four of you also communicate by cell phone through other means as well?
We did.
How so?
We used different apps,
Can you give some examples, if you recall?
Signal, Confide.
And why would those apps be used instead of regular cell phone calls and text messages?
Because they're encrypted.
And what does that mean?
It keeps the records being seen by law enforcement.
The call between the defendant and Dean Schrank that you heard at your house that early morning of January 27th, do you know whether the defendant made that call through the cell phone itself or through an app that he and you and others used?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2:30. We'll take our afternoon recess. We'll resume at 2:45 and then work until 4 o'clock.